Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Shane. I run the events over at 10 Capital Network. We have a great session for you today on how to invest in clinical digital health. So we're really excited for Armando Pauker to come on up and give us his presentation on that. I want to reiterate what the slides you just saw said. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in our chat box. It is unlocked and ready to go. And we will be running polls after every presenter today. So if you are interested, please go ahead and fill those polls out and we will follow up as necessary. With that, I want to bring up Paul Martin to get things started.
Great. Thanks, Shane. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Today we have the special privilege of having Armando Pauker come in and talk about what's going on in the clinical digital health space. I know many people are very interested in this space and looking forward to his thoughts. He's a venture capitalist that has many years of experience deploying funds into the digital health world. And with that, let me go and bring up Armando and have him go through and tell us more about it. And then afterwards, we'll have a pitch from Kristen and Ping on their respective technologies. So with that, Armando, please go ahead and tell us more.
Thank you, Hall, and thank you, Shane, for the invitation. Honored to be here. Hello, everybody. Hello, good to see you. And as Hall mentioned, I'm here to talk about investing in clinical digital health. And so my background, my name is Armando Pauker. I had my technical undergrad at Caltech, then went to Michigan for MBA. And I spent about 20 years of my career in Silicon Valley after school at doing a lot of fault-tolerant computing and working on image processing and a number of companies. Then did management consulting at Booz Allen Hamilton, eventually went into venture capital and have been in venture capital for the last 23 years. I started about 10 years ago, co-founded a company called Tensility Venture Partners to focus really on AI. And so we've been doing AI before AI became as big as it is or as well known as it is right now. And before that, I was at another multi-stage VC fund, much larger fund. And so at Tensility, we focus on seed stage companies in digital health, cybersecurity, AI infrastructure, and vertical and industry applications of AI. But today we'll talk about digital health. So here's the context for my digital health experience. These are the companies that I've invested in over a long period of time in digital health. And this will give you a perspective of at least where I'm coming from when I talk about digital health. The first two companies were very good exits, over $1 billion of exits, over $1 billion of market cap. So those were very good. The third company went public. And then the other companies are much more recent investments, and I've invested both as an angel and as a fund. But as you can see, most of the investments that I've done are in software or in pharmaceuticals. And I've not done any investments in medical devices or things like that. So when I talk about clinical digital health, there's a couple of things there's another sector that's very close to it, which is wellness. And so I just wanted to differentiate and talk about wellness versus clinical digital health. Wellness and clinical digital health are very similar in the sense that they are both digital natives, all digital kind of applications of health. So it does not include any kind of medical hardware. It doesn't include any investments in physician practices or anything that has a physical presence, no senior living facilities like that. It also does not include any kind of healthcare IT software for payers or providers because it's still patient focused. It's really digital health. It's not like healthcare IT. But it may include some amount of wearables or data from wearables because that is a part of digital health. The difference between clinical digital health and wellness, as I see it, is that clinical digital health has an EMR focus, and the EMR captures the patient's results and the progress, where wellness is really doesn't touch the EMR. It's really a direct-to-consumer application that you can find maybe through a website or through an app that will help you do meditation or stress relief or lose weight or exercise. So it's kind of when you're, how should I eat better? And it gives you some kind of potential recipes. But clinical digital health would be when somebody has a chronic issue, for example, and the doctor says, you must see a nutritionist to do these things. So the clinical digital health usually involves very direct contact with the health system. It involves working usually with the doctor or with the provider, and it's reimbursable by insurance. So therefore it's the EMR links you to the provider and the EMR links you to the payer. And the clinical digital health is focused on outcomes, where really wellness is focused on advice. And that's how in my mind, they're very different. And so this rest of this presentation is really around clinical digital health and not wellness and not anything that's really has really of a physical thing. So the topic, of course, today is how to invest in this ecosystem. Well, the fantastic thing about the US healthcare ecosystem is that it's complex. And it's both fantastic and it's daunting. But as an investor, it is really interesting because there's many different ways that you can invest in this ecosystem, right? Because this ecosystem has at its core an EMR. The EMR touches the patient, it touches the doctor, out to the pharmacist, the payer, and then other potential caregivers. So you can invest in this ecosystem either as by investing in a software-only kind of product, or you can invest in a tech-enabled service. So that's one way you could go. You can also decide to cut the ecosystem in a different way and look at investing in Medicare versus Medicaid or value-based. Or you can decide that you want to look at the world by saying, hey, I want to invest in things that are for the enterprise, which is like the large health systems, or do products that were for the providers. For example, things that will help the individual doctor's offices be more productive. But that product would never be sold to an enterprise. Another way you can split this world is to look at it by looking at dental, or you can look at veterinarians and everything around animals, which is another way. And yet another parallel ecosystem is pharmaceuticals. So as an investor, my recommendation is that you have to pick your thesis. You have to see where it is that you are comfortable investing. And the way we look at it at Tensility is we focus really on patient populations and patient populations that we understand, and that we understand and that we can model that it's a big market, and that we can model both the market size of that patient population and the potential things that we can do to improve that potential population. And from that potential population, then we look at solutions that can affect that population, and we go from there, rather than going through any of the other ways that I looked at it. But all the ways are valid, but it's something that you really should think about of how you want to look at this ecosystem. And then as another part of investing in digital health, clinical digital health, is that we need to understand some systemic risks that you really can't get away from, but you can manage. But especially because we're seed investors. So one issue that we see all the time is when startups say, hey, we need a new CPT code. And as an investor, you need to understand that a new CPT code may take 1 to 2 years to get. And that involves, because it's a process, it's not an unknown process, but it's a public process that requires getting data and then presenting it to the AMA and then getting the CPT codes. But then after the CPT code, you have to get reimbursement and payer support. And that might be another 1 to 2 years. And so if you're looking at a startup that has no CPT codes and is hoping for reimbursement and payer support, you're looking at 2 to 4 years. And so that's something that you have to think through. Another thing you have to think through is if a startup comes to you and says, hey, I want to sell to health systems. Well, that cycle usually has a POC and a trial, some kind of trial, and then a 1-year sales cycle after that. Another thing that that's kind of a systemic risk is when you look at a startup, and usually a startup will do one of two things, and they don't do both. And they'll either try to increase the revenue of their target customer, if it's the health system, a payer, or they want to reduce costs. And generally, increasing revenue is more attractive to most people, but reducing costs is valid. But there's a trap in reducing costs that we always see, which is that let's say and this is a continuous conversation that's very difficult for entrepreneurs to understand, that let's say you have a product that takes a process and reduces the cost of that process by 50%. That's great. But if that process is like 0.1% of the spend of the whole system, the probability of getting traction within the whole system is very low. And so when you look at the cost reductions, you need to understand them within the structure of a systemic cost for the whole health system. Because sometimes, even you can reduce a little bit in one section, nobody cares. Then the last thing, of course, is FDA approvals and clinical trials. And I think this has been covered in other talks that Hall and all the speakers that have come before me that Hall has invited. So I'm not going to go over them. But these are, again, another set of long sales cycles. But as a seed stage investor, you can't get away from this. So you have to understand which risks you're willing to underwrite. So for example, we underwrite, we're not willing to wait forever for a CPT code or for insurance reimbursement because that would be like, we think of it as like an ice age, waiting for an ice age to happen. But we are willing to take the risk on health system sales cycles because that's at least under our control. And then we feel comfortable with that. We understand the trade-off, the revenue versus risks of the cost, revenues versus costs. So we understand that. So we're willing to take that risk. And the FDA approvals and clinical trials, we are kind of open to that because that is at least, it's a process that we can sometimes see the end of. Though sometimes we have not had good results, but generally you can get there. The other thing you have to look at when you're looking at investing in digital health is the team. One thing that we see a lot of is we see a lot of people who look at healthcare, who are not from healthcare, they're outside the healthcare system. And there are specifically a lot of very technical people, software, computer people, and they look at the healthcare system, they say, boy, it's really messed up. And then they say, so that's great. Then they say, I can fix it because it's really a technical problem. But what we found is that it's not a technical problem. It's not only a technical problem. The system works the way it works for a reason. And in order to change it, you have to understand that reason and then you can change it. But what we found is that these people are very technical and come into this with, and then if you fund them, you're basically helping them do on-the-job training. They're going to be doing on-the-job training on your dime for the next couple of years while they figure out the language of healthcare. And they get very little technical traction, even though it's a beautiful technical architecture. Another thing you have to think about as a team that is very prevalent in our world is the academics and the doctors who are part of the team, especially if they're founders. Academics and MDs, great, deep knowledge, but they may not be startup people. They really do understand their research, they understand the work that they've done, but they may not be company builders. So in company building requires many different things, many different skill sets. So so you have to understand the risk involved with that. And then the last item that we have seen a lot of that we have to think through is what's the founder motivation? So there's some founders who want to save the world, but they don't want to make money because making money is bad. And then eventually they find out after that first startup fails that, geez, I can't save the world unless I build a company that makes money. So that is a very difficult situation. Our recommendation is that in doing seed stage digital health investing, you cannot underestimate the human capital risk. And the best thing in these things is to have these discussions ahead of time, understand this with your founding team to understand what it is that they're motivated by and how you can supplement them. The next thing is the company building part. So now you understand the team, you understand the systemic risks you're taking. How do you build the company? Well, when we invest in seed, we're maniacally focused just on getting to Series A. That is success. If we get to Series A, then we think of how do we get to Series B, but you're not going to get to Series B, you're not going to get to exit unless you get to Series A. So it's really important for everybody involved to understand the metrics, understand what we're doing here. We are going to get to Series A and we're going to raise more money, but what are the metrics? The metrics for a software-only product in digital health, is very different from a tech-enabled service. So you have to understand what is market. Is a 30%, a 40%, or 50% gross margin good or bad for a tech-enabled service? Well, if you don't understand that and the founders don't understand that, you may get to a point where you get to Series A, you build a company, and you don't get the valuation you want. So that is very important to understand what it is you're doing and why. And then the thing you have to do is you got to build a syndicate to supplement the founders and manage these risks. So our recommendation is you have to have a shared plan with the founders before you invest. You don't want to go into that first board meeting and say, well, okay, well, let's figure out the plan, because it's too late. So you want to do that ahead of time and be able to therefore have understood your risks, understood the team, and then figured out the plan going forward so that you know how to get to the next step, which has got to be from seed to only Series A. One of the things that's interesting really now is AI. So we are an AI fund, obviously, and one of the AI in medicine is one of the very, very compelling places where AI can really make a difference, especially because you're starting to have new proprietary data sets that you can be built, and then these massive models can really affect treatments and costs. So I'm involved with I'm on the advisory board with the medical school at Northwestern University here in Chicago. I'm on their advisory board. I also work closely with Mount Sinai in New York. If you're able to work with some of these medical schools, you'll find that the amount of AI that they're doing is tremendous. You're starting to see, like even at Northwestern Medical School, first-year doctors are starting to have to take courses in data science. So there's a kind of a knowledge transfer, knowledge being built up in that medical, younger doctors, obviously. So that's going to be a big change over our lifetime. But you still have to deal with AI-specific things, such as accuracy and trust. How do you get to good accuracy on the models? You have to manage PII leakage. And then also there's new regulation that's coming around AI. It's governmental regulation. It's happening at the US, it's happening at the EU. And then the last thing that we just want to mention is that we still believe that a human in the loop is still required, even with AI, because it's what we found over the last 5 years, 10 years of investing in AI, is that humans do not respond well to changing their behavior when they're prodded by a machine. Software cannot nudge you, cannot help you change your behavior. It's really another human that helps you change your behavior. So this is really important in mental health or anything that affects human behaviors, that you still need to have that human that can talk to that other human and help them through whatever they're going through. No matter how much AI you have, all that just AI by itself is not going to give you the results you want. The last thing I just want to talk about is that as we think of drug discovery, we see that AI is particularly interesting in biocomputation, because we're starting to move from a wet lab to a dry lab. So then when we were all kids, we had our chemistry sets and we're playing with, making, goofy stuff with our chemistry sets. That dealing with the test tubes and all that stuff, that's going to move away. It's going to be all computational based, and maybe that wet lab is outsourced, but it's really the computation, which will allow you to do much more extensive looking exploration for new compounds and things like that. The generative AI models, which we're starting to see with large language models, we believe can be trained on what we describe as ground truth. And ground truth is when you have a data set that's not, so if you look at the large language models like OpenAI, that data set is really all the words that people have said. Like if you look at websites that they've scraped and books that they've read, these are all the utterances by people. But those utterances are hard to verify the truth of that, right? Because a lot of this is opinion. And is an opinion true or not? That's what an opinion is. But when you use AI models for this type of applications, those models will be trained on data sets that we believe are described as ground truth. They come from the physical world. They're based on actual experimental data. They're based on physics. They're based on chemistry. They're based on biology. And so that is a game changer. So imagine that you have a machine that's like OpenAI or a large language model, but it's based on molecular data. And you can give it the input, and the input would be, give me a molecule that looks like this, that has this toxicity, that has these characteristics. And the model over a 2 or 3 day period will generate, here's 10 possibilities. That is very, very powerful to do and has many, many uses. So that's kind of where the future is. We're starting to, we start thinking about this because we're starting to raise our next fund. And so these are the ideas that will be part of what we're doing for clinical digital health in the future. So, but it's still important. You have to have the right business model and industry knowledge. All the things I said before about smart people coming into healthcare who don't know healthcare and not understanding the metrics and not understanding how the system, that's all still important. So really the takeaway is that AI is exciting, but business fundamentals and people still really matter in building the company. So thank you for this. Here's my contact information. If anybody would like to have a future conversation, happy to talk about this or AI or anything like that at any time.
Great. Thanks, Armando. And if anybody in the audience has a question, go ahead and post it in the chat box. My first question, Armando, is about Health 3.0 or Telemedicine 3.0. This is the using wearables to collect data from a person and then make data-driven decisions. How much is that alike or different from clinical digital health?
It depends, because it depends on the device that's collecting the data. So if the device that's collecting the data is noisy or not an approved medical device, then you move to wellness, right? Doing this, you're getting some information that that brings you more to the advice side, because there's nothing else you can do with it, because the device itself is best way to describe it is noisy. However, if the device has enough medical properties or medical, if it's accurate enough that it would be considered more like a remote monitoring device, then it would be I see it then as a valid way of getting data and then be able to react to that data and then be able to be prescriptive around that data.
Great. And I've been hearing about value-based healthcare for several years now, and just was curious, what is your take on it? Is that successful? Is that moving forward, or is that still the jury out on it?
I think that value-based care is a lot like EVs. So 10 years ago, all of us saw that EVs were needed. 10 years from now, maybe more people, maybe we'll go past, 50% that EVs will happen, and there'll be a 20-year cycle. I think value-based care is the same way. Value-based care is inevitable. It will happen. We're probably 10 more years away from that.
You think it's having the intended impact of reducing cost?
I think that it's just very difficult to, I think that slowly people will start to see that it will. But I think it's just a slow grind because so many processes need to be changed.
Well, I once had the investment thesis that anything that reduces cost in healthcare, not just shift it, but reduces cost, is a winner in the healthcare space. How much cost do you have to save before that really becomes a viable thesis?
I don't know if it's, the way I think about it, it depends on where the cost is and so if you look at the way, in order to look at cost, you have to understand how the payers react to cost. So the payers, my understanding and my experience with payers is that they have a top 10 list, or they can list the top 10 items that drive costs in the system at any given point. If you can affect those things, then you can affect change. If you believe you're reducing costs in the system, but it's not one of their top drivers, then you're going back to that example where I gave that you're reducing costs in the process by a lot, 50%, but that process in itself doesn't drive very much, doesn't move the needle. So maybe nobody will care. So you have to, it's not just about driving costs down. Is driving costs down good? Yes. But you have to drive down costs in those places that move the needle.
So we have a question from the audience. You have discussed clinical and wellness digital health startups. What about new digital models? For example, multidisciplinary digital hubs that streamline patient experiences.
Yeah, I don't know that much about them because the question would be, who pays for this? So if it's something that is driving value for the payer and you're going to get payer reimbursement, then I think that there's something to be said for that.
Okay. And then my experience with AI is that it's coming, and we had a presentation on the future of the radiology department. And the upshot was that there's not enough radiologists out there, so AI will be filling in the gaps. Would you think that's a viable investment thesis? AI is going to fill in the gaps where there's no one there to do the work?
The problem, that's true. So there was a startup in Chicago that was doing a radiology AI kind of let's say assistant, and that startup was existed in Chicago about 10-15 years ago. It went out of business, and the reason it went out of business is that nobody would trust it because it was still, even though it came up with a diagnosis, you still had to have a radiologist approve it. So I think that you're going to see the tipping point once we can get to the point where you have to fundamentally believe that the machine is more accurate than the human. If you don't believe it, you're always going to need the human in the loop to approve. Then you're looking at an application which increases productivity. So now you're going to a productivity and a cost reduction rather than like a massive, new thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking if it took a radiologist could cover 100 patients, and then with AI, one radiologist could cover 500 patients because the basic work's done for them up front, and all they have to do is just glance at it and move on. They don't have to do a lot of detail work. So if it saved them enough time, it seemed like that would be a viable thing.
It is, but then you have to look at it as a productivity app rather than it becomes a productivity application rather than a brand new innovation. So
Right.
you can't have a thing where then the AI, let's say if like the real innovation would be is if the AI looked at this, understood what was in the radiology thing, in the radiology data, then went to the next step, is gave you the next step from that, made the next appointment, and then, or gave you the next treatment and you were on your way. And that was all seamless and automatic. That's true innovation. Otherwise, you default into productivity.
Right. My last question is it seems like almost every startup has AI coming into their product, whether it be a medical device or, as you said, therapeutics. We see a lot of systems around biomarkers where they're using AI to do drug discovery. And this interesting business model, you actually make money on day one rather than year 10 with that type of solution. But is that going to be true? You think AI is going to be embedded in everything going forward?
Yeah, there's two memes going around right now. One meme is that an AI, and the other meme is the fund is an AI fund. And so I believe that both are true, but in terms of AI coming into every company, we look at that as the majority of that is going to be workflow software that adds AI. But that doesn't make them an AI company. That's a B2B software company that was doing workflow that's added AI. We're focused on those places where AI drives really pure innovation.
I see. Okay, great. Well, I appreciate the answers to the questions. With that, let's go ahead and bring up our first presenter, Ping Ye of Voxy. If we could have Ping come on up and open up your slides and kick off. Love to hear more about what you're doing there in this space.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks Armando for the insights on your investment perspective. Hi everybody, my name's Ping Ye. I'm CEO of Voxy Health, and Voxy is a company that's extracting insights and intelligence from the human breath. Chemicals from the breath called volatile organic compounds are chemicals that we are able to sense with our device. So as you can see in the picture, this is a handheld device that can measure thousands of VOCs to predict the presence of disease. Our vision is to impact millions of lives through this technology, through early disease detection. Our mission is to make the most approachable, accessible, and accurate device possible. And to Armando's point, I guess I'll highlight that, yes, we are also in the making money is part of what we're trying to do as well with our company. We're raising $5 million. We're almost done with this seed round. We envision a Series A at the end of Q2 next year. And we have quite a few investors so far into our current round, including the previous or the founder of Boston Scientific. Our use of proceeds are to support more clinical work before the clinical trial starting in the second half of next year. And I'll get into some of the details that differentiate us in the next few slides. Before I leave this slide, I guess I will say that 25% of invested capital into us actually gets back to the investor. We're part of the Minnesota Angel Tax Credit Program, and you can be anywhere in the world to receive that tax credit. This slide I'll move through quickly. I'm sure many of you know the impact, of course, of cancer to families and the health system. The big takeaway here is, unfortunately, in many cancers like lung cancer, they are diagnosed often much too late, about 84% of the time. Again, cancer is a big problem with the number of deaths, but in the shift of the industry in terms of doing early stage diagnosis, that's a big opportunity for us, for many people, and for us being a non-invasive device that could be done anywhere. is a big step forward to early detection of diseases, not just lung cancer, but many cancers, since our device is a platform that does not have to change from a hardware standpoint to measure the other volatile organic compound patterns that come from the breath. We will work with initially value-based care type organizations, since they are very established and sensitive to cost, and work with patients that have indeterminate nodules from a lung cancer perspective. I'll get a little bit into that some more, but about 2/3 of the time, pulmonologists and physicians don't really know what the nodule is when it is discovered in the body. So from a solution standpoint, we have a device that I'm holding in my hand right now, if you can still see me, and that can be connected to a mobile phone. This will be ready by the end of this year. For the last few years, this has been in development at Boston Scientific. This company is a spin-out technology from Boston Scientific and University of Minnesota. I was able to, as CEO, spin out everything and form this company around it. We want to take that breath, analyze it, leverage data science and machine learning to analyze these complex signals and to provide actionable insights for physicians and their patients. We did not discover volatile organic compounds. It's been studied for decades. This review paper on the right shows a nice diagram of all the different organ systems that have been studied and the types of diseases that can come from such of the studies of these peer-reviewed papers. What we do is we create multiple breath prints per disease, because each disease can have multiple subgroups within them. But like a breath print or like a fingerprint, we're able to correlate these patterns back to these unique patterns. And so this is a multitude of applications on a single device of hardware, and we'll leverage software to give us that optionality to study whatever disease will come after lung cancer. To Armando's point before, this is something that can be in the clinical space, but could also be in other spaces, such as veterinary and other areas that don't need FDA approval, for example. This slide hammers home for me, when I first saw it from the team, how unique volatile organic compounds are, in that they shift when one is healthy versus has lung cancer, or there are actually new VOCs that are produced when one has lung cancer. And our platform is able to pick up all of these. So it's a unique approach. It's a cross reactive array approach that is able to measure thousands of chemicals. So how do we do this? We have the desktop unit on the left. We have the mobile device, breathalyzer, if you want to call it that. We have created a new type of sensor called a varactor. It's a variable capacitor that works on quantum capacitance. And the way it works isn't just the structure of the circuit, which is very small, produced on a wafer, but it has a couple monolayers on top of these circuits structure. The first one is graphene, or for those that don't know graphene, it's a single layer of carbon. It is very sensitive and has a unique electrical capabilities and is very sensitive. We don't want to sense everything, so we tuned this sensor to have several dozen unique surface chemistries that we're able to put at scale in a self-assembled monolayer on top of this sensor, giving us the unique capability to sense VOCs that relate to disease. So this is an accessible, accurate, and approachable diagnostic that can be used for multiple diseases. So what is cross-reactive array? So this is just an example in this slide showing for lung cancer, there's different types of cell types, different chemistries that can come off of these cells in the human body. It goes from tissue into the blood, and then from blood, it passes into the lungs and then is able to escape. VOCs prefer to be a gas, and so this is how it gets into our breath from anywhere in the body. So our sensor, this is one from the desktop on the left, but you're able to see how different families of compounds and the unique chemistries inside of them respond and have a unique response for each of the chips, because each chip has a unique surface chemistry that gives a unique electrical response for each unique chemical. So we want to use this device to look initially, the low-hanging fruit are to help physicians understand if a nodule is cancerous or not. And unfortunately, a lot of biopsies are done, and about a third of them are not cancerous. And so this is one area of risk we can take out, but also helping to avoid wait and see. When nodules are smaller than 8 millimeters in size, unfortunately, the doctor often says, we're just going to have to see if it grows large enough to know if it's cancerous or not. And we think this is a technology that is a better way. You can see here that some of the raw data, but essentially we have clear separation between the different features that we're able to look at in our device. There's clear separation between cancer and no cancer. Our sensitivity and specificity numbers are decent and improving. Just to give you a level set of something like this, GRAIL for stage 1 cancers has less than 20% sensitivity. And we're multiple times better than that. A lot of our patients, actually a quarter of them, have been stage 1 patients. From getting to market standpoint, this is the traditional path going through the FDA. We are working with those that do not take that FDA path, one being the Department of Defense, and there's, of course, the optionality of going towards the veterinary route. This is just showing the human route using the FDA. We have strategic partners that you can see on the upper left, clinical partners in the middle, and integrated ACO hospital systems, value-based care organizations that have been established over the decades that we plan to work with. And you can see the timeline along where we'll get to FDA approval. Now, one unique thing that's different than what Armando said is that we do work in a world where reimbursement can come through a PLA code. So you can get reimbursed through a PLA code prior to FDA approval. And then you can have a much more efficient path to reimbursement there. With regards to manufacturing and scale, from a COGS standpoint, this is something that can get to under $100, under $50. If you actually rebuild the devices and reuse them, it drops well under $25 at high volumes, and you can see those numbers there. But this is a stable supply chain and has been in development for the last nearly 10 years. And the core IP is still going to be done in-house. 26 granted patents protect this technology. From a competitive analysis standpoint, we're like a blend of liquid biopsy and gas biopsy companies from an accuracy and accessibility standpoint, leveraging the technologies that we do that I've covered today. From a financial summary standpoint, you can see our EBITDA as well as number of procedures that will drive that growth. On the right-hand side, you'll see there will be some dependence on partners since we do need providers to give us access to patients. The team, this is my second company that I founded and serve on a couple other boards of companies as well. Our scientific founder, Greg Sherwood, was the senior fellow at the highest level scientist at Boston Scientific, who's been working on this for nearly 10 years. Rhea Fintz, our chief of product. Randy Schistel was the global head of R&D for Boston Scientific of all 7 divisions. He's come to join us as COO. And Greg Peterson from the University of Minnesota, who's also been working on this for quite some time. Here are the deal terms. We can get into those in Q&A, cover that a little bit on one of the first slides. And then from an exit standpoint, you can imagine as we become more and more successful, there may be several interested parties. And I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. Here's a summary of what I talked about. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ping. Armando, what's your first question there?
Yeah. Hi, Ping. Thanks for the presentation. Really very complete. You had mentioned that you had partners and you had, like, I saw Optum and a number of other payers there. Can you describe the nature of that partnership with them? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah, no problem. No problem. So a couple things. The first is we're putting together some work with them for them to leverage their data on helping us understand clinical utility from a payer perspective. That's number one. Number two is seeing if this technology can be predictive of the genomic work that they do. And number three, from a payer perspective, they do see the value in something that can be home health and early detection, because they'd much rather pay in terms of lower claims costs, let's say $15,000 in radiation or surgery, rather than a $100,000 immuno-oncology drug annually. So after 3 years, you might have a $15,000 cost or a $300,000+ cost. And they already know today that only 50% of IO drugs actually work. So that's a huge difference in cost for them. And that's what they're interested in investigating. Eventually, we want to integrate into their provider network and sell this
Have they told
technology.
you what you need to do to show them? Have you discussed with them what you need to show them in order for them to really go to the next step with you, whatever that is?
Yeah, they just gave a we just presented them a list of they've given us a menu of items that we will go through. There's a handful of things that we'll step through, and once we go through that menu of items, we'll then step to the next level of understanding clinical utility and the potential of, because they have 3 venture arms within UHG as well. So we'd love to take the first couple steps, prove to them how well this works, and take it to the next steps.
How long will that take?
With UHG right now, the gap analysis will probably take, once we engage, probably it's pretty quick. It's less than about 10 weeks of doing the analysis and a gap analysis. And then we'll take it from there. That's the first step, depending on what path we want to take. It's working with their genomic team.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. I think we're at the end of our time. Ping, do you have any final closing words there?
No, thank you for everybody's time. We are nearing the end of the seed round. It's a post money safe, more favorable, the kind people I think investors prefer. And we do see a conversion in the second half, in the second half of the second quarter, excuse me. So May of 2024, not too far away. We can imagine a conversion from the safe into a priced round. So looking forward to that. And please reach out. You can look in the send me an email or click the QR code on the bottom left there and set up a Calendly time with me. Thanks.
Good luck.
Great. Thanks, Ping. And appreciate that. We'll now move to our next presenter, Kristen Taylor of Lightline Medical. If you can go ahead and show your slides, Kristen, and kick off.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me today. There, can you see it okay?
Yes, we can.
Good, good, good. So I'm Kristen Taylor, CFO of Lightline Medical. I recently joined Lightline to help prepare to take this product to market. It's just great to be here. So let me dive into our problem and what we've got here. So we all know infections are not they're not a small problem, it's a big problem. And so is the use of catheters. You know, I was recently at a Medical Alley event and ran into someone from the company that bought my last startup, and he asked me what I was doing. I told him about Lightline, where we're using visible light to prevent catheter-based infections. And his first question was, you know, when does this come to the market? Which I thought was interesting, given it's, you know, not a common topic. And then he told me his story. He had recently gone through a situation with his father, where his father had shattered a hip and was in the hospital recovering. And he had a Foley. He had one of these urinary catheters. Now his father is one of those 13,000 deaths in the US. And you know, it's sad. It's terribly sad. But what was really shocking was he said that the doctor and the healthcare providers took him aside initially and told him what would happen, that this was a very real possibility with these urinary catheters, the infection. And that's exactly what happened. The fact that the products today and the solutions today still don't work in such a large market is really shocking. There's also, you know, there's catheter infections everywhere. We've got peritoneal dialysis and a number of others. So Let's talk about an issue that's making it even worse. You know, another thing we all know about antibiotic resistance, right? I mean, you put those two things together, it's, you know, it's quite an apocalypse. It shocked me that antibiotic resistance is now the third leading cause of death in the world. You know, the healthcare providers, they see it. Our investors, they see it, and they see the resulting pain from the problem as well. I think that's why we have so many doctors investing in our company. They see the impact, but they see the need for a new solution. So here it is. Here is our product. It's the Lightline Medical photo disinfection system. It's real and it works, and it's using visible light that the eye can see, 405 nanometer to be specific. It's just above the ultraviolet or the UV. So that's the light that goes into the catheter to kill those microbes. You know, and it's not a new thing. I mean, I'm sure you've been seeing all the visible light therapies out there that are coming to consumer markets, you know, such as those masks for acne or for anti-aging. I mean, people are buying them like crazy. They're safe. They throw them on their face. It's nothing new. Now, when you think about it, ours is a clinical version, right? Where you're using stronger doses and within a catheter. So it's quite novel and it works. And more importantly, we own it. So we have an exhaustive patent portfolio. If those of you know our CEO, she's a patent attorney, an ex-patent attorney, and we had some background in that as well. So we've got 30 patents, 19 pending, and we have freedom to operate because, again, visible light is not new. So this was more important than ever. And we've got the platform technology. So urinary, I talked about, that's actually, it's a huge need, but it's actually our second product because that's inside the body. What we chose to do for our first product is to go into the dialysis market where there's also a huge need, but it has the benefit of being outside the body. So a much easier 510K path. So question, how will we make this work? You know, I talked about our IP strength. We do have that background, but we also have a significant background in infection control, and we have a significant background in startup. We've had multiple exits within the team, and then we've had multiple products brought to market. So let's talk about that market. So we're just going to start with our first product, the PD market. It's a huge market. I mean, think about dialysis. Worldwide, you've got 2.6 million patients out there, 9.4 billion. Within transitioning people to PD, that home dialysis, which COVID really strengthened why we need that, infection is slowing that rate of adoption. They need a solution. They need a solution to get more people on the safer and cheaper PD. We've been talking to the major dialysis providers, Fresenius and DaVita. They've told us about their initiatives to move people to PD. We've seen the governmental initiatives to move people to PD. So based on all of that, when we look at our share of the market, we're targeting within 10 years, we'll be serving annually 152,000 patients. So that's PD patients. We have a razor blade model, $70 for a fiber used for 52 weeks. And we'll have the light engine, which has a 5-year life to support that. So let's talk about where we are today, our traction. It works. We have been able to kill the bugs. You know, like I said, visible light's been around. It seems pretty easy, but in practice, it's hard, but we've made it work. We have the IP. I talked about that. We have collaborations. We are collaborating with Mayo. You'll also see Mayo as an investor of ours as well. So we're collaborating with them on our first product, and we've already received distribution for our second product, the Foley, which will be after our PD. So we've got significant traction there. And let me talk a little bit more about Mayo because it is so significant to us. As I said, that we're collaborating with them, and they've also invested in us. And, you know, while this is an honor, it really shows us the market adoption. The market needs this and the market believes in this. It has been critical for us to work with the Mayo. We talk to them, we talk with the doctors there weekly and gather their feedback and input to make sure we've got the right product and we're able to get it into those patients' hands. Like I said, not only have they collaborated with us, they're investing with us. We believe they will be an early adopter, and we believe that they will also be incentive and catalyst for others to invest as well. So that sounds great, right? Now let's talk about the competition because that's where it could all fall apart, right? Someone could beat us to it. So first of all, we have the standard of care, which is tragic. You know, you heard my story at the beginning. It doesn't work. And along with that, you know, one of the products that I'm sure was used was Bard has their silver coated catheters. Those don't work either. I mean, you know, trying to kill those microbes with the antibiotic resistance in a catheter with fluid where it's not degrading is really hard. We've been able to do it with visible light. Now, when we look at the future, there's a number of other, I'm sure you as investors have been hearing about this. There's a number of people in the space going after it as well. We continue to watch them because we think this is really critical. It's a race. We want to get there first, and I think we're poised to that. But we also see the downside of some of their solutions. The chemicals and the UVC light, it degrades and there's problems with them, which is back to the power of the visible light. So now, how do we make money? How do we get this to market? As I said, we're close. We're looking at the 510K filing for that first product, the PD product, by the end of the year. We'll be filing that for clearance. We expect mid-year. We've already met with the FDA. They approve of our testing. We've received the results we need. So now it's about going to market. We are in full planning. That was part of why they hired me. We have a fractional marketing team helping us build out the pipeline. We're in talks with our head of sales. It's someone we know who's grown an infection control company before, and he is geared up for our market release the second half of the year. We will go for, assuming we don't have a distribution partner for this first one, we will go for limited release. We will gather data on the customers, and we will continue our talks with future distributors using that data to sign that on. We expect to do that by the end of 2025. So financial results, let's talk about that. This is where it's a good reminder of the power of the platform. We have multiple products coming out. You can see I just called out the PD users. So those are the number of people that would be using those weekly fibers. You know, we look at it just about $4,000 per patient per year, right? So if we're able to get 1,000 patients the first year, now think about that, there's about 80,000 in the US. Fresenius and DaVita have 65,000 alone. So we're looking for that limited rollout of 1,000 users, ultimately scaling that up on the PD side to 54,000 by year 5. I show the 5-year horizon here with our various launches. We will need a Series B for those launches to fund that, but with that platform technology comes what we see is a very large exit. With those revenues, if we use the ballpark of the 3 to 5 year times return on the revenue, we're looking at $1 billion plus the exit. And when we've looked at the comps for the different platform technologies, that supports it as well. That would give our Series A and our Series B a sizable return. So the ask here, we've got, as I said, this round is a 7 million round. We're just closing up. We got about 1.2 left, pre-money valuation, 18 million. And again, that's supported by this platform technology. We also are giving a warrant coverage of 8%. You can see the use laser focused on going to market. So why should you join Lightline? We have deep portfolio patents. It works. The team, passionate about bringing this technology to market. Our customers are ready, and we hope we can continue these conversations with you to join us as we reduce healthcare costs while saving lives. Thank you. So now let's open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Anybody in the audience would like to post a question, please do so. And Armando, what's your first question?
Kristen, great presentation. Great to hear about your product. I assume, is it true to assume that Mayo will be your first customer?
We hope so. We hope so.
So, so along that path, what do you need to do for them to become the first customer? What do they need to see? What do you need to prove? And what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, so what we are doing is we're continuing to work with them, and we're now opening up those conversations of how do we get in through their acquisition cycle? What burdens might there be with other contracts they may have, which would preclude our technology. So working through those details. We're also then showing them that it truly does work in humans and with the training materials, and that we are poised to launch, that we will receive that clearance from the FDA.
Will they want to do a proof of concept, a POC, before I mean, before they accept you into the system?
Yeah, we have been working with them already. We've had our technology in their hands, and we continue to work with them so that they can see the results.
That's usually kind of, sometimes that happens with the innovation groups, but it's not the core line of business who uses it. Is that different for you?
Yeah, we are exploring those conversations. And unfortunately, I don't have more details, but I can get those for you offline.
Okay, that's good.
So my question, Kristen, is there's quite a few groups out there with different technologies, biofilms and the like. How is your product better technically than what's on the market today and what's coming in the pipeline from other companies?
Yeah, great question. It's something we are always trolling around, seeing what's out there. You know, as I said, with those coatings, when you think about catheters and the fluids going through, the degradation is a real problem. I mean, we've seen that with the existing products out there on the market. What we've also seen is that that's on the inside. And with our technology, we're able to kill those bugs on the inside and the outside. And using light does not have the same antibiotic resistance properties that you see with chemicals as well, because it's hitting it in various different ways rather than one pinpointed way. The resistance takes much, lifetimes and lifetimes to build up versus what we've seen today.
Great. A question from the audience. Have you considered cost and process for training nurses on how to maintain the new device? Doctors usually rely on nurses to change and troubleshoot catheters.
Yeah, exactly. And, we are in the human studies or the usability phase of our first product, which is at home. It will be nurses training the patients, but it very much is a patient technology. So we've been working through the user guides. Because there's so many catheters and this is sitting outside the body, it's a much easier training. So we've been factoring in their feedback and adjusting our training methods. But for this outside, it should be pretty straightforward.
Great. And Armando, did you have one more question?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, great. I think we're near the end of our time. I want to thank you, Kristen. Did you have any closing words you wanted to say on your presentation?
Yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. It looks like we've got another one of our team. Carrie Hobb is here as well, our director of operations, or our executive director of operations, and we're excited to get this product out there in the market's hands. So
Great.
thank you.
You bet. Well, I want to thank everybody for their presentations today. Armando, thanks for the presentation on clinical digital health. It was very enlightening. And Ping, thanks for your presentation on Voxy. And Kristen, thanks for yours on Lightline Medical. We polled everybody in the audience and we'll see what interest people have and we'll make introductions afterwards. For those in the audience, if you're interested to learn more about 10 Capital, please contact me and we'll be glad to follow up with you afterwards for any interest you have in the deals or in your company. So with that, we'll go and close it out, guys, and see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.